and then I'm going to talk about the Supreme Court and some of my predictions for the how the court will rule in their current term. Now I understand that this might kind of be seen as a departure from the normal focus of the channel on just strictly business issues, but I think it's important to cover cases before the Supreme Court because the way that they rule on these cases, or at least most of them, have implications and ramifications for those that are in business. So with that said, there was 4 cases that I wanted to go over, and so I hope that the viewers are you guys are just as interested in these cases as I am. So the first case that I wanted to talk about is I have it listed here in my notes as DeBoer v. Snyder, which was the Michigan same-sex marriage case. However, I think that the court is actually going to call that case Obergefell V Hodges. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I might not be. That was one of the 4 cases that was before the U.S. Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, and in November that court became the first circuit court to rule against the first federal circuit court to rule against same-sex marriage rights since the DOMA decision back in 2013, and so that was very interesting. That ruling allowed Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee to keep their bans on same-sex marriage. And for this case, I predict that the Supreme Court is either going to rule 5-4 or 6-3 to overturn the Sixth Circuit ruling and allow same-sex marriage to be legal nationwide. I think that the way that it's going to rule, the way the justices will break down is that Ginsburg is going to rule in favor, along with Justice Breyer, Justices Kagan, Sotomayor, and Anthony Kennedy. I think are all pretty much locks in order to vote in favor of those rights. And then the justices I believe that are fairly certain to vote against it are Samuel Alito, Justice Thomas, and Justice Scalia. And then the wild card I think is actually Chief Justice John Roberts. I think it's kind of it'll be interesting to see how he votes. I think it's kind of a 60% chance he votes against it, but I think there's about a 40% chance that he will vote in favor of same-sex marriage. So I hope that he takes the side of Anthony Kennedy and votes in favor. No, when I was looking at the case, it's amazing on how many amicus curiae or front of the court briefs have been filed in that case. And also, so I guess while I'm talking about that, I can tie it into business a little bit. It seems like most of the major companies are either coming out in favor of it, and the ones that aren't, they're not commenting on it. I'm not sure if there's really that many, major corporations, especially multinational ones, that have come out against it. And it is interesting to see that there's more Wall Street banks that are signing front of the court briefs in this case, even than they did in 2013 for the case challenging the Defense of Marriage Act and Proposition 8. So the companies, the banks that have signed up briefs in favor of same-sex marriage rights are AIG, Bank of America, BlackRock, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, UBS, and Wells Fargo. And so that's really significant because that's quite a large contingency of major Wall Street banks. And it's also interesting to note that of those, 3 of them did not participate in the 2013 brief against the Defense of Marriage Act, and those include JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. So it is good to see them coming around on that issue. I know that I personally signed an amicus brief with called the People's Brief with the Human Rights Campaign. So I look forward to seeing the court rule on that issue in June and make same-sex marriage legal nationwide. So now down to the next case, King v. Burwell. So this is one that challenges the Affordable Care Act, and it challenged specifically whether the federal government could set up exchanges in states and then and then allow subsidies to customers that buy insurance from those exchanges. The plaintiffs in this case are arguing that patients are only available for insurance subsidies if they live in a state where the state itself has set up an insurance exchange and not the federal government. And in this case, so this has massive implications for the insurance industry and then for patients that are on plans covered by the Affordable Care Act. And my prediction is it's going to be a 5-4 ruling in favor of the defendants, the federal government. So I don't know. I think. Oh, I'm sorry. With the exact votes, I think that it'll be the four um, traditionally conservative justices are going to vote against the government, and then the four liberal justices are going to vote in favor of the government, and I think Anthony Kennedy will side with the government as well in this case. So the next case on here is Glossip V Gross, and this is one about lethal injection, and it came from Oklahoma because that state is using, I guess, a three-drug method to execute its prisoners, and they've had a lot of issues within the last year or so on inmates gasping for breath and choking and suffering a lot of intense pain during the executions. And so some courts have put stays on the executions of various prisoners because they think that it's cruel and unusual punishment, and they want them to revisit their methods. So I think in this case there's going to be a 5-4 ruling in favor of stricter death penalty limitations, specifically on the drug midazolam, midazolam. Again, I'm not 100% sure on the pronunciation of that word, but I think it's going to be a very limited ruling. It's going to be a very narrow scope, and it's just going to say that states are going to, have to prove the effectiveness of that drug before they can use it. Something very technical and something very narrow in scope. And then the final case that I have on here that I wanted to talk about today was Comptroller of the Treasury of Maryland versus Wynne. Excuse me. And for that case, it's really interesting. It challenges the Maryland state government on whether they can tax residents for income that was earned on other states if they've already paid taxes on that income earned in the other state. So this is one, I guess the Maryland Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the plaintiffs and said that this one family didn't have to pay income tax because they'd already paid it in another state, even though they had lived in Maryland, and because it was earned in another state. And the state of Maryland obviously is opposed to that ruling because they want the tax revenue. And so for this case, I think there's going to be a 5-4 ruling in favor of the plaintiffs, saying that states cannot tax income earned in other states if they've already been taxed on it in that state where it was earned. And this is really probably the most relevant to business out of all, well, either this one or the King v. Burwell, the most relevant to business out of the four Supreme Court cases that I'm discussing in this video. Because if the Supreme Court does rule against the state of Maryland, then that's going to mean that they're going to lose out on about $200 million worth of revenue. So that's very substantial. So I'd like to get everybody's opinions on those cases and let me know how you think the court will rule and what you're hoping for. I guess not all of them are, super relevant to business, but I think that, the court system in general has a very big role in how companies are affected and the economic situation. So it'll be interesting to see, how the rulings affect business and how companies react to them and to see how the court rules. So let me know in the comments section below what you think of these predictions. Are they off? Are they, are they way off? Are they, am I on point? I guess the last thing I should have brought up earlier in the video is I do have a gavel here. This was given to me as a Christmas present last year because I am a little bit of a nerd and I do like to kind of, have things that make me feel kind of official. So this is my gavel. So whenever the court rules, I'm going to be pounding the gavel as well. So thanks for watching.